Hey everybody, welcome to another video. Today I'm going to be looking at Blake Lively's lawsuit. So essentially what's happening here is she was in a movie last year called It Ends With Us, and at the time there was a very negative reaction on the internet to her allegations against her co-star slash director. And it looks like this weekend she put out a lawsuit. So how does this all relate back to what we do on this channel? Because this isn't really like a drama channel, right? This is more of a folklore, storytelling, esoteric, all those kinds of things, but we also do media criticism. So when I see a story like this, especially with this article that came out today in the New York Times, I'm going to put that up on screen. When I see an article that comes out like this from the New York Times, it's very interesting because it details this sort of back and forth between the director's camp and this damage control publicist. And when you have one of these sort of damage control publicists, they will often try to create a positive impact in the media for you, and they will try to create a negative impact in the media for whoever is the other end of that spectrum, right? Be it a company, a person, whatever. So with this Blake Lively thing, it's very interesting because it ties into sexual harassment, which she claims happened on the set. It plays into this sort of historical narrative of witch hunts. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to go into sort of a timeline of historical witch hunts and let everybody here kind of understand where witch hunts came from.
Witch hunts, as we understand them, didn't spring up from nowhere. Early examples of targeting so-called heretics and magical practitioners can be found in the story of Hypatia, the famous philosopher, astronomer, and mathematician from Alexandria in the late 4th century. Though her death at the hands of a mob in 415 CE was not officially labeled a witch trial, many historians interpret her persecution as an attempt to eradicate pagan influences and women's intellectual authority. Her murder set a grim precedent. Powerful women, especially those associated with knowledge and alternative belief systems, could be silenced under the guise of religious righteousness. The formative background of witch persecutions can also be seen in early Christian councils, which laid the groundwork for how religious leaders framed heresy and paganism. The Council of Elvira, in the early 4th century, for example, introduced harsh penalties for those deemed sinners or heretics. Soon after, the councils of Ancyra and Trillo expanded on these ideas, criminalizing pagan rituals and practices. These decisions hinted that those who strayed from accepted doctrine, often women working as healers or midwives, or those preserving pagan ceremonies, risked ostracism or worse. But why target women in particular? In many pre-Christian societies, women held roles as healers, priestesses, or guardians of folk traditions, positions that gave them social power. Once Christian rule solidified, anything resembling pagan worship became suspect. Many of these roles were systematically condemned as witchcraft. Women's perceived spiritual influence and their connection to older rites alarmed leaders seeking to unify their territories under one doctrine. Consequently, as Christianity spread, local folk traditions were called into question, and those who practiced them found themselves accused of summoning dark forces. This hostility reached a fever pitch in the late medieval and early modern periods of Europe. Across Germany, France, England, and beyond, trials for witchcraft skyrocketed, often turning into mass panics. The growth of both church and state authority intersected with societal fears and scapegoating during times of crisis, famine, war, or plague. Witch hunts were as much about controlling social chaos as they were about eliminating supernatural threats. Eventually, these practices crossed the Atlantic with European colonists. Early America was shaped by religious fervor, with Puritan communities in particular worried about moral corruption and spiritual warfare. Few events illustrate this better than the Salem witch trials of 1692 in Massachusetts Bay Colony, where more than 200 people were accused of witchcraft and 20 were executed. Strife within the community, tensions over property, local politics, and genuine fear of the devil intensified the panic. Although Salem is the most famous instance in North America, witch accusations flared up in other colonies too, if less dramatically. Over the 18th and 19th centuries, belief in witchcraft still lingered, but the legal authorities in both Europe and America gradually ended official witch trials. In America, the last person executed for witchcraft was in the early 18th century, and in Europe, accusations continued sporadically well into the 18th century. But the widespread systematic hunting finally subsided. Nevertheless, the idea of a witch hunt continued, finding fresh targets in different eras. Political dissidents, subversive artists, and rebellious activists, especially if they happen to be women. The same mechanisms of rumor, scandal, and moral indignation still emerge when society feels threatened by women claiming power in unorthodox ways. Social media frenzies, tabloid gossip, and partisan outrage can echo the panic and paranoia of centuries past. While the stakes are different, the underlying impulse to silence or punish those who don't fit neatly into societal norms remains alarmingly familiar. We may no longer burn witches at the stake, but the legacy of these centuries-long persecutions endures in our collective consciousness. Hypatia's tragic death, the harsh rulings of early church councils, and the feverish accusations in Salem all remind us how easily fear and superstition can be harnessed to stifle opposition, or simply to target those who dare to stand apart. As history demonstrates, sometimes the most fearsome monsters aren't lurking in the forest, but dwell within our own biases and insecurities.